What is up guys? In this video I'm gonna show you a bunch of plugins that I love to put on my drum bus. These plugins just adds a lot of character, crisp and warmth, and I'm gonna show you what they add. Let's jump into the project. Let's go. Okay, so these are my drums without any of the plugins on the drum bus. And now this is with the plugins on. So you might notice that the top end of the drums is just a little bit more present and everything just feels a little bit more warmth and the body of the drums just feel really nice. So let's jump straight into the different plugins that I use on my drum bus. Firstly, I don't route my kicks to my drum bus. I route them to a separate bus because I want to add a little bit more of low-end processing together with my bass. So just disclaimer, but it's all of the other drum elements that I route into my drum bus. So the first plugin that I add on my drum bus is a plugin called Fielding DSP Reviver. It's this plugin. Sorry that the GUI is a little bit small because it's a little bit of an old plugin. Basically what this plugin does is that it adds harmonic distortion. It tries to emulate vintage gear that adds this kind of distortion to your sounds. And you have these two processes buttons that you can press, second and third. So I believe the second one just adds a little bit more of crispiness and this third one adds a little bit more of warmth. And I have just dialed in a little bit. Just adds a little bit of subtle distortion to the drums and it just makes the claps and the hi-hat sounds a little bit more gritty in my opinion. So obviously one thing that you should pay attention to is when you add a lot of plugins to your drum bus, look at the volume meter because you might add a little bit of extra volume each time you add a plugin. So what I do here is that I actually in the output section, I turn down the volume knob in the plugin just to compensate in what I add. So when I add something, it's just the change shouldn't just be more volume, it should be something that's changed to the sound. So I can better hear that because there is not a really drastic jump in volume when adding this plugin. So it really just adds a lot of harmonic content and it just sounds amazing to me. Okay, so the next plugin is the solid bus compressor. If you're using Ableton, you can use, I think it's called the glue, and there are a lot of different plugins trying to emulate this classic analog piece of gear. Basically what it does is it just glues together the sounds a little bit more. So I'm doing a little bit of threshold, a little bit of make up gain, and then I have a ratio to 4. I have a slow attack and a fast release just to get more transients through. And basically what you can see is that I'm not doing that much of the gain reduction because I don't want this to be like an over pumping effect. It's just to catch a little bit of the transient peaks and just glue together my different drum sounds. I basically use the solid bus compressor on every session with my drums because it just sounds amazing. Okay, moving on to the next plugin. It's the passive EQ. There are also a lot of different plugin emulation of this classic analog gear. This one is from Native Instruments that are partnered with Softtube. It's just the one that I have. It sounds amazing. It's a really musical EQ. Just use whatever plugin that you want if you have another one in your DAW. But basically what I want to do here is that I want to add like a rather broad boost at the 3K area. So that's where you really can hear the clap, the hi-hats and all of the percussion elements. So it's this area here. So it's just to bring forth that content in that area, in that frequency area. And then I'm obviously also doing a high shelf boost just to boost the high treble of the drums. So I have set this to the 16K area. So it's really high up in the frequency range. And then of course like having a really broad high shelf and then I'm boosting. So this is the area that I'm boosting. And it's basically just to make the drums cut through the mix a little bit more. I really want that crispy high end of my drums. So the shakers and the hi-hats really punch through the mix and it just sounds amazing. Again, look at this gain knob. I actually reduced the volume by minus 1.5 dB just to compensate in what I'm doing here because it's boosting the overall volume. So I'm just reducing it a little bit. Okay, the next one, this one is pretty cool. It's the J37 Tape from Waves. It's also a plugin that emulates a tape machine. I'm not an expert in what this does. Basically what it does when I read about it is that it just adds analog warmth. So putting stuff through tape. There are different modes that you can use. I tend to use the plugin called Mastering Fat, Tight and Open, and then I tweak from there. So it just gives like the sense of everything just feeling a little bit more wide and opened. The upper range of the drums feel a little bit more alive, in my opinion. So basically what I do here is that I increase the input gain. This knob is linked, so every time I increase the input gain, it's actually decreasing the output gain to compensate in terms of the volume. I push it a little bit, and then I turn down the noise level because I don't want to have any cassette noise on top of my drums. I add that in a separate audio clip instead. So I turn this down, and then I actually turn up the saturation because I want to color my drums a little bit. So this is how it sounds. So if you increase the input gain, really squashed. We can increase the saturation. So this plugin can really add so much character to your sounds. I also used this on instrument buses as well. Play around with the saturation knob because you can really get some really cool, characterful sounds out of this plugin. We are beginning to arrive at the end of the drum bus. I add the Neutron 3, only the EQ component, and this is basically to remove any of low-ended frequencies that we might create from adding a lot of plugins, and also if there might be something in the individual drum elements. Again, I route my kick drum to another bus. That's why I do a high pass filter cut here on the drum bus. And then I'm doing some small tweaks on resonances that I think was sounding a little bit too harsh in the drums. Like basically not anything really drastic, just subtle changes, just to sculpt the sound a little bit more. This is basically what this plugin does. It's really cool, but you can use whatever EQ that you like. I just love to use Neutron 3 because it's so versatile, and you can use dynamic EQ and so on. You could also use FabFilter, it can do the same. So this is the EQ. Then the last plugin that I use is the Ozone 9 Imager plugin. This is basically just to control the stereo field of my drums to make sure that stuff should be in mono in the lower range of the frequency range, and then I can play around with opening up upper range of the drum frequency range. So that could be like shakers, hi-hats, and also like the top end of the claps. Try to pan them out a little bit more with the stereo widening here. So if you take a listen. Let's try to bypass it. It just does a little bit of extra widening in this area up here. So it's from 1K and upwards. And then I'm just making sure that everything from 150 and downwards is just completely mono. But we did the high pass cut here in Neutron 3. So I don't think that we have any content down there. It's just something that I do just to make sure that it's in mono. We can actually solo this band. So we can actually hear the toms are present. So I just make sure that they are in mono in this area. So this is basically it from my drum bus. The last two plugins here are just for automation. So that doesn't have anything like in creating the tone of the drum bus. I really love to use these different kind of plugins that try to emulate analog gear hardware because they just add that extra texture. These are subtle changes in each plugin, but just by adding them up, they create a tone and a really cool character to my drums. So let's try to listen to the drums without the plugins and then with them on, so you can hear the difference that they make. So this is without the plugins. And then with the plugins. it just sounds more alive to me, and I really like that it's being distorted a little bit, so that those hi-hats and the claps are sounding a little bit like kind of squashed, not too much, but it's just like that analog feel, and I really like that. It's kind of lo-fi, but I'm just a sucker for that. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope these drum bus techniques plugins can help you achieve a really cool drum sound in your own production. If you like the video, it will mean so much to me if you will smash that like button or even subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to not miss any of my future videos. If you want to support me even further, you can go to my web shop and browse some of my sample packs and preset packs. There are a lot of them in there. Also, don't forget to become a member of the Discord server. It's a server where we share a lot of music production tips and we collab and give feedback on each other's tracks. It's just a cool place to hang out and talk about a lot of music related topics. So I hope to see you in the next video. Take care. Peace.